Canon's RF 70-200 2.8 was one of the lenses that attracted me to the RF system. A compact and lightweight 70-200 2.8 like this never had existed before, and it was one of the distinctive factors for me at that time. Since late 2020 I've had this lens for me and carried it with me far more often than any larger telephoto zoom lens I used previously. Recently Canon introduced a new one. That's the RF 70-200 2.8 Z. That came out a few months ago, and I will explain you the differences and compare both lenses, the old one, the new one, and look at how they perform. I'm David, this is DAVISION, and let's go. Canon's first RF 70-200 2.8 launched at the end of 2019 and impressed everyone, including me and the competition. It wasn't and still isn't cheap, with brand new prices ranging between 2,500 euros and 3,000 euros. However, it is frequently part of discount promotions and cashback offers from Canon, and there's a robust second-hand market for these lenses. The new RF 70-200 2.8 Z hit the market 5 years later with a steep price tag of 3,600 euros, setting benchmarks for lenses of this type, but unfortunately in a negative sense. The Z in the lens's name signals its focus as a video hybrid lens, as it belongs to Canon's new hybrid lineup, alongside the 24-105 2.8 Z and the new VCM prime lenses, which are also optimized for filming, or at least that's what Canon says. The new one is a whopping 5 cm longer than the old one, but it features internal zooming, eliminating the dust-prone air pump design of the old one. When fully extended, both lenses are roughly the same in length, so the old one is easier to stow away in your backpack when retracted. The new lens is only 50 grams heavier, which is barely noticeable at all, and it's even about 1 millimeter narrower in size. The tripod collar now is integrated into the lens, and while the foot lacks an Arca Swiss slot like with Sigma or Tamron lenses, it's quick and easy to remove and store away. A minor but significant improvement in the lens is the filter thread size, which is now 82 mm. This means I don't need stepper rings or different filter sizes for my 3 2.8 zoom lenses. It's a mystery why no one did this earlier. I think that's such a game changer. Canon also addresses one of the biggest drawbacks of the old model. The RF 70-200 Z that I have here is finally compatible with teleconverters. This was a frequent criticism about the old one, but it was a trade-off of the compact design. This teleconverter compatibility was a major reason I personally bought this 70-200 2.8 Z with a 2x converter. I effectively have both a 70-200 2.8 and a 140-400 5.6 in my bag without needing the space or weight of two separate lenses. There are notable changes in the controls of the new lens. I appreciate that the rings have been rearranged. Focus is now at the front, just behind the RF control ring, and zoom is behind that. So it's consistent with most lenses. My 3 2.8 zoom lenses now all follow the same structure. But the best is, the zoom ring is now much smoother and easier to turn compared to the old version, which required significant more force. The zoom rotation angle is also much shorter. It's under 90 degrees from 70 to 200 millimeters, making it enjoyable to use, especially for video use, where the old one could get stuck and it was really hard to make smooth zoom transitions with the old 70 to 200 2.8 RF. A new addition on this lens is the aperture ring. Though unfortunately it's clickless and only usable in video mode on older cameras before R5 II and R1. Thankfully it can be locked securely. The lens also includes customizable buttons and Canon's usual set of switches. Though the zoom lock switch is gone, since it no longer extends, it isn't needed anymore. Additionally, on this lens here, like with the 24-105 2.8 Z, you can add on Canon's 1,100 euros expensive power zoom motor, if you want and need it. The build quality of this lens is excellent. Although the lens is made of plastics, it feels lightweight rather than cheap. It remains sealed against dust and splashes, and the lens now comes in white or black if you want. I personally prefer wide for telephoto zoom lens. Anything else looks like you are cheap and could just afford a Sigma or Tamron lens, not a nice and shiny Canon wide lens. That was a joke for all that haven't got it. From an optical standpoint, the new 70-200 2.8 lens is slightly more complex. It features 18 elements in 15 groups and now includes an 11-bladed aperture instead of 9-bladed. What I particularly liked about the new lens is the significantly improved minimum focus distance of just 49 centimeters compared to 70 centimeters. However, this is only available at the shorter end of the zoom range, like with 70 millimeters or 100 millimeters. Still, the reproduction ratio is much better than with the old version, allowing for semi-macro shots with a 1:3 ratio. Overall, apart from the price, this looks very promising so far. The lens addresses some weaknesses and offers several advantages on paper. Ideally, that's how it should be. But let's see how this lens performs optically, because at 3,600 euros, it should deliver exceptionally good results. At first, I compared the old RF 70-200 2.8 to the new Z version. At 70 and 100 millimeters, the center sharpness is very similar, but the edges and corners are significantly sharper with the new lens, what is quite welcome. But at 135 millimeters, the old lens is a bit sharper in the center, while the edges are very similar on both lenses. And then, what I didn't see coming, at 200 millimeters, the old lens is noticeably sharper and offers better contrast compared to the 70-200 Z. On the whole image, and especially visible at the edges, the old one is just plain better. I also ran some tests with the new 70-200 Z paired with the 2x teleconverter against my old EF 100-400 lens that I want to replace with this combination. And the results were rather mixed. At 135 millimeters, the new lens was significantly sharper across the frame. At 200 millimeters, there's hardly any noticeable difference in center sharpness, but the edges of the old 100-400 are surprisingly much better. Then at 300 millimeters, the trend continues. The almost ancient EF lens is significantly better here. And at 400 millimeters, the results are roughly equivalent from one to the other. At this point, I'm a bit disappointed in terms of sharpness. I expected much more, especially when comparing the old to the new version, even if this lens shouldn't really replace the old one. But it's a newer version of the same kind of focal length and aperture. The teleconverter results are okay, as teleconverters typically amplify any pre-existing weaknesses of a lens. However, compared to the old 70-200 2.8, there's little about this lens that stands out for me from a sharpness point of view, aside from the improved edge sharpness at 70 millimeters and 100 millimeters. And there are even several weakness points in this new version in terms of sharpness. But at least in practice, no of this should be a major issue in terms of sharpness. The lens is sharp enough for nearly all demands. Wherever wildlife, portraits, sports or landscape, you will rarely have anything to complain about it in terms of sharpness. Still, good enough shouldn't be the benchmark at this price point. For this amount of money, I expect absolute top tier performance from my lenses. And let's see how it performs in other areas. Regarding color fringing or chromatic aberrations, I found very few in my images. Lateral chromatic aberrations in particularly, such as those on contrast edges, didn't stand out here. While I didn't perform a direct one-to-one comparison with the old 70-200, it was never a significant issue on the old one or the new one either. I captured some nice portraits in sunlight, various wildlife subjects, including beautiful butterflies and some pretty nice birds. And I also took some landscape shots during sunset, and in all these scenarios, chromatic aberrations were pretty minimal, if not seeable at all. However, I did notice some with the butterfly shots here, which I believe to be LOCA, longitudinal chromatic aberrations in the background or foreground of the image, because the butterfly's head wasn't entirely in the focus plane. Even so, these were within acceptable limits within my test shots at 70 and 200 millimeters with f2.8. They look quite good and under control in this case. But now let's talk about bokeh. For a lens designed for wildlife sports and portraits, this is a critical factor for me that shouldn't be overlooked at all. The old version wasn't perfect in this regards, but was solid overall. The bokeh circles were at least clean and well defined. The only issue, starting at 135mm, was the extreme cat's eye effect towards the image edges of the frame. Likely due to the compact design of the lens. But for a 70-200 2.8, this isn't a huge problem. It's common with this kind of lenses. But clean and beautiful bokeh circles and a pleasant bokeh is far more important with this case. So let's take a look at the new one at 70mm and f2.8. Ooh, yeah, what was that again? Should I show it to you again? Oopsie, yikes. Those are the onion rings of doom, I would call them. And for a 3,600 euros lens, which is supposed to be the kind of successor to one that handles this much better, I don't know what this should be. At 100mm, it's just as bad. At 135mm and 200mm, it's less noticeable. Through, in a direct comparison, it's still much worse than with the old one. The positive aspect, however, is that with the 11 rounded aperture plates, the bokeh circles remain extremely round even when stopping down. And likely due to the larger build, there are far fewer cat's eyes than with the older 70-200. But how does this problem manifest in practice? My tests are set up. Examines bokeh circles from point light sources in the background, such as direct lights in the background blur of a lens or little specular reflections. And as you have seen, the results here are unfortunately not very good. Or to say it a little bit clearer, that's the worst 70-200 2.8 I've seen in regards of this from Sony, Canon and Nikon so far. In practice, however, it can look much worse. As I mentioned earlier, a teleconverter magnifies every weakness. Using the 70-200 Z with the 2x converter that I bought with this lens and for this lens, I captured what should have been beautiful images of a little egret in Tenerife. However, I'm absolutely dissatisfied with how the 70-200 2.8 Z renders point lights in the background of the subject. These little specular reflection highlights. To put it bluntly, it looks absolutely terrible. Light sources or reflections in the background blur become extremely busy due to these onion rings, making these images completely unusable for me. And that's a real bummer. On the other hand, and this is especially frustrating for me, the lens actually is able to produce a very pleasant and soft bokeh when there are no point light sources in the bokeh. Like here behind the butterflies, or in these duck photos, or in portraits, at least the ones without point light sources. But as soon as bokeh circles appear from reflections from light sources, they seem restless, they have these onion rings. And again, I have to ask myself, what's going on here? This issue reminds me of the 35 1.4 VCM. Is this a side effect of this hybrid lens design, something related to the glass that's used for these lenses that caused this? I don't know, but I don't like it. That much do I know. Regarding distortion, thankfully there's not much difference between the two lenses. Neither exhibits significant distortion at any focal length. It's visible, but not really a thing to talk about. And so it's the first of these hybrid lenses with no problems in these regards. Good job, Canon. And in terms of vignetting, the new 70-200 Z is finally noticeably better than the old one, which likely had more edge shading due to its smaller compact design and the extension. What has truly impressed me about the new version is the handling of backlit situations. While there's no direct comparison here, I took some stop-down shots directly into the setting sun in Tenerife and there was almost no ghosting. Even with side light, no flares were visible, despite my usual habit of not shooting with the lens hood. But quite nice if you use one. The lens hood includes this practical little window of allowing you polarizer adjustments without needing to remove the hood at all. Otherwise, it's worth checking out how well this video-centric lens performs for video, since it's made for it. As mentioned, the handling at all is excellent, it's top for video, wow. The zoom ring is perfect for smooth focus transitions, that's another world compared to the old one. And the weight distribution is much more improved thanks to the new foot. And this also makes the lens gimbal friendly because the foot can easily be removed, stored away, and the lens no longer changes length. The old 70-200 showed slight focus briefing at 70 and 100 mm, still within an acceptable limit but noticeable. At 135 and 200 mm there was no longer any issue in terms of focus briefing. And as far as I could tell, the old version was also parfocal during zooming, meaning it didn't lose focus when changing focal length. The new version is completely free of focus briefing, even at 70 and 100 mm. It shows no briefing across the entire focal range and remains parfocal. Both features it is marketed for and they work properly here. However, I noticed that small reflections in the background blur sometimes don't look as bad at first glance as in my test setup or with the little e-grid. The autofocus on the other hand was not only excellent and precise for photos but also for videos. It's silent and fast and exactly as it should be. Also the image stabilization works really reliably, providing a locked-in view in the viewfinder, and as soon as you half press the shutter it stays just there. But all of this was already present in the old version and is nothing really new. And with that we come to the conclusion. Overall, the results of comparing a 5-year-old lens to a brand new one is very disappointing in this case. The advantages for me are that this is compatible with converters, but with use that's maybe not as good as I've shown. Internal zooming is nice, the zoom ring is very easy to turn, and it has an 82mm filter thread. Is that worth 3,600 euros? Absolutely not. And if these 3 points don't matter to you at all, the old 70-200 2.8, the air pump design, offers optical performance that is at least equal, if not in some cases significantly better than with the new one, except for the vignetting and the minimal breathing. And maybe the cat's eye of the bokeh, but the bokeh is quite nicer at all. At this point I'm a little disappointed. I've now tried 3 of these new hybrid series lenses from Canon and found none of them to be fully convincing or worth their price for me personally. These lenses seem to keep getting more expensive but not necessarily better. Or as in this case here, even worse in some aspects like the bokeh. As a Canon shooter, it's tough. There really aren't any alternatives. I bought the 35 1.4 VCM because there was no other option and my Sigma was broken. And I got the 70-200 2.8 Z because I wanted to streamline my kit with teleconverter use for wildlife applications. And now I have a lens that I'm afraid of using with specular highlights in the background. Wow, great job Canon. Honestly, I love your cameras. I think there's not much that can currently beat an R5 Mark II in terms of overall package, what it can do, the colors it produced, and it offers everything that I want. I'm a Canon shooter deep at my heart. The first system I really felt like home with, and that's exactly why I'm so critical with Canon. I just want them to do better. I want it to be worth it and not to feel like we Canon users are being left behind and charged more for less optical performance. But charge, from my point of view, whatever you want for these lenses, but then the performance should justify the price even a little bit. And that's not the case for me here. And it's a completely different story with the camera bodies. The R5 Mark II in Europe costs almost 3,000 euros less than Sony's A1 Mark II and offers an overall much better package. But Sony's 70-200 2.8 GM2 is cheaper, it's compatible with teleconverters, as the previous version was also, and doesn't have the weaknesses of Canon's newer and more expensive lens. Literally, the only downside of Sony's lens is that you can't attach a power zoom motor to this lens. And you need a 77mm filter. Okay, I cannot recommend this lens at all. I will make my peace with it because I have it and I will keep it, yes. But I'm definitely annoyed that I sold my EF 100-400 version 2 and my smaller, older RF 70-200 2.8 so quickly, because if I still would have had it now, I maybe think about it twice or 3 times or however much. Anyway, if after this video you think the 70-200 2.8 Z is the right choice for you, you will find links to it in the video description. If you make a purchase through these links, you will support this channel at no additional cost to you and help ensure that I can continue making videos like this one. For those of you who think the old RF 70-200 2.8 doesn't look so bad after all, I will include links to this one in the video description as well. So let me know your thoughts in the comments under the video. If you enjoyed this video, leave it a like. Please consider subscribing, it would mean a lot to you with my little English channel. And if someone also activates the notification bell, it will make me super duper happy. Here are 2 more videos that you can watch next. That's me for today. So we'll take care and let's see you next time.